Today we're looking at Top Secret from 1984. It's written, produced and directed by Jim Abrahams, David Zucker and Jerry Zucker, the comedy team behind Kentucky Fried Movie, Airplane, Naked Gun, Hot Shots and Scary Movie. The story, such as it is, has an American musician drawn into a Cold War plot involving a nuclear scientist, the resistance, a love triangle, kidnapping and assassinations, all behind the Iron Curtain in the former East Germany.
So where did you see this? It must obviously have been like mid-80s.
Yeah, I think whenever it was released on VHS, me and a bunch of mates, we had a little video club by this point, and it was one of those that we just latched onto and loved. It was maybe 11 or 12 and the perfect age for all the kind of, juvenile humor and comedy slapstick moments and the little sort of, boobs and farts and all of that sort of Abrahams Zucker stuff where it just really resonated. And then it's one of those that I've gone back to as like a late teens and in my early 20s, and you start to see the kind of filmmaking technique, and it is,
or lack thereof.
Oh no, I think some of the what? Some of the techniques in it I think are fantastic, like the jumping straight into the scene where it's running backwards,
Yeah, that's like the one standout scene though. Some of it is like really quite inept.
Oh, I thought that was the thing that was its kind of saving grace, that the story, I sort of dressed it up as this sort of big Cold War conspiracy, but it's really clunky and the performances are really wooden, but the technique, I love all the visual gags, and yeah, that's the stuff that I thought keeps it alive.
I think I must have seen it around the same time. I don't know if I've seen it since. It was definitely like a mid-80s VHS rental. I remember I watched it at some friend's house, and it's like, oh yeah, the people who made Airplane, because everyone had seen Airplane by that point.
Yeah, sure.
I even saw that in the cinema when it came out. And yeah, and it was amazing. And then I don't think I've seen it since. I really don't. I can't think of a situation where I would have come across it since. I haven't owned it, and I'd kind of forgotten about it until you mentioned it for this.
Yeah, but I found, like, I watched it, maybe I cheated. I watched it with my kids, and they were giggling all the way through it. So you sort of, for me, it kind of reinforced its longevity, just seeing them two chortling and guffawing at, like, some of this really silly gags, in the third act where Chocolate Mousse punches the German guard off the top of the castle and then he smashes into 1,000 pieces on the ground. Like, that got proper belly laughs on my sofa. So right. I was just like, this film has stood the test of time.
Yeah, we watched it, my wife and I watched it, for the first viewing for this, and kind of, it takes a little while to warm up, but when it gets going, it just doesn't stop. And we were just like all over the place for it. And then third time around, I actually watched it because it has its fair share of bad gags, and it has some, for me, some extremely weak moments which I just would have hacked out. Yeah, but sure. I actually made a paper list. Look, excellent, bad, and appalling gags, and the excellent list takes up 2 and a bit pages, and the bad is just kind of like 5 things, and appalling is 3, which is basically the music numbers. But it's just an amazing hit rate of joke after joke after joke, all
good,
different
it's
kinds.
Really solid. I watched Naked Gun a couple of months ago just to sort of see how it stood up, and it was really dull, really slow, and with only a couple of gags. It's like a gag every sort of 15 minutes. So you're just sat there. But yeah, and a lot of the set pieces are really overwrought as well. So yeah, coming back to this, I was like, oh no, I've picked a turkey. Matt's going to go mental. And I was just surprised at how funny it was still. I think, yes, Val Kilmer's pretty one note all the way through it, but it's not about the story, is it? It's just about a load of good gags.
I'm hesitant in discussing this to let it turn into just describing the gags all the way through. So I think if we backtrack a bit and have a look at Zucker, Abrams and Zucker. I mean, have you followed their progress? I sort of lost touch with them after about 1990 or 91 or something.
Yeah, I'd seen Hot Shots. I saw those. Being a Rambo fan, I'd seen the parody with Hot Shots and Hot Shots Part 2. And I think once they got into sort of pastiching other movies, that's kind of where I lost interest. Maybe I saw a bit of Scary Movie on Netflix or something, but I certainly haven't kept up with any of that stuff. But I liked, Airplane. I don't know if I saw the sequel.
It's the space shuttle one.
Oh, maybe. Has it got Shatner in it?
Yeah, it's got one of the best visual gags of all time with Shatner in, which I'm not going to spoil.
Is it the door gag?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I have seen that.
Yeah. I sort of remember them kind of spreading out into the film business throughout the 80s, but It's only when I kind of look them up, and Wikipedia has a handy chart with tick boxes next to each film showing their involvement in it. But they did all kind of branch out into mainstream movies and more kind of traditional comedy and storytelling.
Didn't Jerry Zucker, didn't he do Ghost?
Yeah, yeah, and you've also got Jim Abrahams did Big Business. The three of them did Ruthless People between them.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, before they kind of went back to doing just kind of spoof movies, they did kind of branch out and have some hits with regular movies.
Yeah, okay. Just to prove they could do it.
Have you seen Kentucky Fried Movie then? Have you kind of gone back and watched that?
Yeah, not recently. A friend of mine, Rob, he was like obsessed with it, and so I watched it on his recommendation. And again, I thought it was pretty decent, but it is kind of just a load of skits strung together. It's not a proper film, is it?
I've never managed to finish it. I found it on DVD in a charity shop and thought, oh, I've always wanted to see this, and this is probably the only chance I'll ever get to get a copy. And I started watching it, and it's just like, not a single laugh. Nothing at all, crickets, tumbleweeds. And I gave it half an hour, and it was just like, no. And it's John Landis as well, so I just couldn't get into it. And then I was watching an interview with them doing research for this, which showed a clip from it, which I hadn't seen, which again was just like, but this is terrible. I just don't get it.
I remember the poster for Kentucky Fried Movie being in all of the video shops when video shops first opened.
All right.
It was one of those posters that was everywhere, with the big Converse trainer and all that stuff flapping around inside of it.
But yeah, so they go from this kind of like comedy theatre background into making the movie with John Landis and then Airplane. And there's an interesting bit in that interview as well where they're saying that nobody at the studio understood the script and understood how it was going to come together, and it was only when they'd started shooting and had the "Don't Call Me Shirley" scene, and then they showed the rushes for that, and the executives were all in the room, and the exec phoned them up and said, "I kind of get what you're going for now. All right, I've got it."
Yeah, it's a classic, isn't it? Airplane. They really get away with that.
I think it's perfect. I think it's their best film, and it works in ways that this one doesn't, which I think we'll get to a bit later on. Yeah, and I guess after Police Squad was just a one series that wasn't renewed, then there was this, which was their kind of big movie comeback that kind of fizzled, didn't it, in terms of box office? And
yeah, I don't even know if it had much of a life on VHS afterwards.
But it's one of those ones that everyone's seen on VHS. That's where the cult's built up, isn't it?
Yeah, but do you think it has a cult, this one? I always find I sent a copy to a friend of mine when I was talking about doing it for this podcast, and he would just like replied back, "Thanks for sending me that. It was shit."
Well, that's the thing. That's what a genuine cult movie is. It's where it finds its perfect niche. If you look up Top Secret on YouTube, there's hundreds of people who put all their favourite clips up there. Virtually every single joke is exerted and put up on YouTube,
right, okay.
And not by the same people.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's got a following. Dying to get into all the people involved.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a pretty impressive list of crew, isn't it? It's gobsmacking.
So I couldn't find much documentation about the making of, but it was clear it was shot at Pinewood, which is flagged up in a little visual gag where they're showing a map of England and Europe, and there's a little dot saying Pinewood on the England. Here's the thing, like, you've got an amazing roll call of talent involved, and I'm sort of paraphrasing somebody else's observation about a movie called Winter Kills, which I read recently, by William Rickert. It's like a paranoia thriller that was made in 1978, 1980, and it's got this incredible roster of talent. The cast has got Sterling Hayden, Jeff Bridges, Anthony Perkins. It just goes on and on and on.
This sounds incredible.
It's got photography by Vilmos Sigmund.
All right, wow.
And it's just, but the thing is, it's not that great. And you have to realise that, sometimes these amazing kind of combinations of talent come together because everyone's available and everyone needs to get paid at some point.
Yeah, sure.
And I do kind of get that feeling with this movie, that they're bringing this production to England, and, you've got like production designer Peter Lamont, who's done some stunning, huge-scale stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the Lamont brothers worked on all of the Bonds, didn't they? I think I made a note. It was something like all the Bonds from For Your Eyes Only up to Casino Royale. I mean, that's a run, isn't it?
Yeah.
As well as, like you said, Aliens, True Lies, Titanic.
I watched Aliens again the other night for the first time in a while, and it's just, remarkable bit of production design.
Yeah, it's pretty decent bit of work there.
So coherent.
I love all the miniatures as well. That stuff looks great.
Christopher Chalice, DOP, who's
Yeah.
he's done some great looking movies, Dandy and Aspic and Two for the Road, mainstream movies like The Deep. He's worked with Michael Powell.
Yeah, he was one of the Woodfalls guys, wasn't he?
Yeah.
There was 2 editors listed, but it seems like the main editor was a lady called Françoise Bernot, and she worked with Costa Gravas, Melville on Army of Shadows. She worked
perfect.
Yeah, that's it. She's prepped, fully prepped, with Cimino on Year of the Dragon and The Sicilian. Polanski, she cut The Tenant. So, yeah, she's got a solid pedigree coming into this.
Do you think this is like right at the front of her showreel?
I don't know.
There's music by Maurice Jarre, who's even then was a legendary composer. But you just know, and it's funny, I've read a couple of books by editors in this last year, and 2 different editors have had experiences with major composers where you'll sit down and they'll have a meeting and the composers will stroke their chins and say, yes, I think I can. The ideas are coming together, and the editors he says he's just sitting there knowing that he'll go back to his office and pull a pre-prepared piece of music off the shelf and say, dust it off and say, right, we'll use this one.
Yeah, that's it. This
and
never
that's
found a home.
Definitely the case in this movie. So you got Maurice Jarre, but he's just pulled a few kind of like library tracks off his shelf to use. It's the action track, the romantic track, and they bear no reference to what's going on screen really. It just kind of mood music.
Yeah, that's it.
Omar Sharif turns up for a few scenes.
Yeah.
But the fact is, none of them are really doing their best work here.
No, of course not. No.
And it's kind of like you do realise that when Hollywood comes to town, and if you're available, yeah, I'll do that, and maybe something better will be along.
Yeah, what's it paying?
Exactly. I mean, Peter Lamont is the biggest surprise in this, because I think one of the film's worst failings is that it does look pretty shoddy and cheap.
Yeah, I don't know. There's the scene in the ballroom at the Gay Schlufen. It looks really sumptuous and lush, but yeah, the rest of it does look really clunky. But I thought that's what they're going for. That slightly sort of cheap and cheerful. Those, what do they call them? Those Hollywood movies that they just used to churn out.
Yeah, Studio B movie pictures.
Yeah, that's it. I think they've sort of gone for that, haven't they?
It doesn't help the movie. The thing for me, I think what was so off-putting for a lot of people is that it's kind of a spoof of the kind of movies that people didn't like to watch at the time. I mean, I'm sort of putting myself in a 1980s mainstream audience headspace, particularly young people who would go to a comedy. I'm thinking nobody really wants to watch something that looks authentically like a bad war movie shot in Britain on the cheap. I think that's quite off-putting. And I think one of the things that Airplane has that helps it is that it's all set in airports and offices and on planes, which are all kind of synthetic environments, and it's easy to kind of match up those environments and make everything look cohesive, whereas this is just kind of all over the place. It wants to be all sorts of different things with all sorts of different setups and settings and tone and stuff. You've got that ridiculous skeet shooting thing at the beginning, which looks kind of cheap and shoddy and doesn't feel particularly warm and sunny in California.
Yeah, no, it was shot in Cornwall, wasn't it?
I didn't know that, but you can kind of tell to look at it. And it doesn't really hang together visually. You say the sumptuous looking ballroom, but it's not photographed particularly sumptuously. It all looks quite flat and overlit. And
yeah, there's some nice blocking there, though, where the camera's sort of gliding through all the dancers. There's quite a lot of nice technique in there, but the point of the film is like those one-liners and the visual gags are what you're there for, and the rest of it is just to sort of prop you up from gag to gag. I'm very forgiving.
No, I agree. I can see that's what they're going for, but the actual end result is quite off-putting visually. There's times in the movie, particularly early on, where a handful of gags in a row aren't working, or it's a bit kind of thin, and then you would fall back on just the kind of comfort of things looking good or feeling competent, and sometimes it does just feel a bit rickety and not in a good way.
I think by the time you get to that last musical number in the Das Pizzahausen, by then, it's starting to grind a little bit, isn't it? It's only the next sequence that sort of brings it back up. The raid on the castle, where they
the final raid.
Implement their master plan to rescue the professor.
And I think I'll get all my bitching and complaints out of the way before I start praising it. I mean, that's part of the reason I think it wasn't a hit. I think the other reason is that the tone is all over the place. And again, you expect a movie like this to have silly digressions and go off in crazy directions, but like with Airplane as well, there's a few kind of like diversions early on where you have a disco scene and a couple of flashbacks, but other than that, it's pretty consistent in tone. And I think this, you start feeling like you're in a Second World War film with the fight on top of the train and all that stuff, and the Cold War generals who look exactly like Nazi generals in a kind of captured castle.
What it feels like is somebody that hasn't done enough research. They've just kind of taken a load of tropes and chucked it in the blender and crossed their fingers. Watching it as a 11-year-old, you're much less critical. And I think that's the level that they're making films at and for. And I think that's, you just have to kind of accept that.
Okay, I won't labour the point, but then you jump around to that excruciating skeet shooting thing, which isn't catchy and it isn't funny and it isn't particularly cleverly filmed.
It's really flat.
You're just waiting for it to finish.
Yeah, that's painful.
And then you kind of jump back into what feels like it could be present day, but then sort of isn't, because you have Nazi generals coming aboard the train, this sort of thing. So you never really know when it's set. And again, the fact that it's supposed to be set in present day, and Nick Rivers' records are like literally visually the album sleeves are straight out of 1958 or something.
Yeah.
I don't think it's purely for 11-year-olds. I think it is sort of for an adult audience because it's rated 15 or double A back then, but
I think there's a couple of gags that have pushed the rating up, haven't they? I think the rest of it's pretty. It's juvenile. That's the thought behind it is juvenile. The execution is juvenile, and the humour is juvenile. One thing it reminded me of while I was watching it, it felt like this film was the only reference for Tarantino when he made Inglourious Basterds, because so much of Inglourious Basterds feels like it's this film. It was so mad, from the roll call on the crazy resistance fighters to the way the Germans are presented and the big kind of opulent offices that they've occupied. It just felt like, oh my god, this is all Tarantino watched before he made Inglourious Basterds.
You should spread that rumour further, and that would completely legitimise Top Secret. Because you'd have a million Tarantino fans that say, oh yeah, Tarantino referenced Top Secret. Top Secret must be a classic. It's a stone cold classic. I'm gonna put it in a triple bill at my 35mm only cinema this weekend.
Ooh. So, what was your impression then? Because it sounds like you were laughing at the gags, but frustrated by the filmmaking.
First time around I was just laughing at the gags all the way through, because I'm not a frustrated professor and I wasn't kind of analysing it as I was watching it. But I was getting that background tone. It was kind of dampening my memory of it. Can I put it that way? I was thoroughly enjoying it and laughing my head off all the way through, but you think back on it and in your mind you're just like, yeah, but why isn't that landing in my memory properly? And then I watched it a second time around to make notes. It's just like, yeah, some of this is quite rickety when you look at it closely. Quite rickety in a bad way. I think the film would land a lot better if it just felt better made. What do you think? So I've just talked for about 25 minutes.
Yeah, no, I guess, I think this is sort of my handicap for being critical of films, is that there's some bad films that I just forgive because my memory of enjoying them as a child or as a young adult is so pure. So when I look at Top Secret, I give up on the story and how convoluted it is, and the performances and all of that stuff, and I just sit there waiting for my favourite gags to come around again and get to the end, and I feel very satisfied.
I don't classify it as a bad movie. I don't think it needs forgiving in any way. I think it's a really, really good movie because it does exactly what it has to do, and it does it really, really well. I think it's a bit of a shame that it doesn't have that extra polish, and I do think it's that lack of polish that I think put a lot of people off at the time.
Isn't it supposed to be, there's that American TV show Hogan's Heroes that had the sets were kind of, it was the same set over and over again, and it was just rattling and shaking as they were trying to record. It's supposed to be that level of shoddiness. There's an irony to it, I think. But, yeah, it was maybe has been lost throughout its entire existence because filmmakers were born in the 40s and 50s, so the things that they're referencing, there's jokes in it that I have to Google the person that they're making jokes about, like Mel Torme. I was like, who the hell is Mel Torme? I had to stop it and Google that. And there's the thing about one of the catalogues, I think there's a handful of very specific jokes, isn't there? There's like Ripple Blanc, which I had to look up, and I had to look that up.
Pinto cars as well.
Yeah, that's it. So I think, these were older guys making a movie for a younger audience, and I think maybe that, you know, it's that there's the kind of the discrepancy between filmmaker and audience is a generation. I think we're both in the same boat here, haven't we? We've just got a list of gags that we liked, or gags that fell flat in sequential order, that also have actors working alongside. So we have the opening scene with Omar Sharif fighting Sergeant Kruger on top of a train, and Sergeant Kruger stands up just as they approach the tunnel for the traditional villain getting knocked off the top of the train by the tunnel, and instead he just smashes through the tunnel and comes out the other side with a, you know, there's like a Nazi-shaped hole in the train tunnel, and my kids were laughing at that. I was like grinning. You know, the same joy that I've had at that gag for like 30 years. So, yeah, I just think like those visual moments in this film, they're such a pleasure.
I don't pick up until significantly later.
All right, okay.
So what's your next one?
So then we see, I like, you know, there's another gag where the Nazi messenger drives up on his motorbike to Nazi high command and then just ties the
there's a
strap
running
around like
gag
a
about bikes as horses, isn't
bikes
there?
as horses, yeah. Those things that, like,
so stupid.
I'm proper tickled by that stuff. I think it really works. We see Warren Clark, who has a nice kind of like continued presence in the first half, then just disappears. But also there's the scene where the messenger comes up to the general and takes off his helmet, but his chin strap stays in place. So while he's talking, the chin strap from his helmet is just still there. Like, those are the little moments, you know, the giant telephones, the giant watches, you know, all of those little things. Those are the things that like keep me giggling all the way through this, you know, where plot and character and performance all fail. They're little visual ticks, and the fact that it's all optical, you know, that's what keeps me giggling all the way through this. But yeah, I think next we get skeet surfing, which is excruciating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although
I think let's just get it out of the way now. I think all of the musical numbers in this absolutely fall flat on their ass, and they all seem to run for about 4 or 5 minutes as well.
They're really over long, aren't they? And I think that's only to get the running time up, because you know, there isn't anything else really to pad it out.
But it's really bad. I'm reminded there used to be, apparently, I have heard at some point, there used to be some loophole in BBC budgeting where if you included a musical number in a show, it changed your classification for budget or something like that. So that's why so many comedy shows, even throughout the 90s and 2000s, had a shit song in the middle of an otherwise very, very funny programme. And I'm kind of reminded of that, where you just have to sit through 5 minutes of this dross to get back to the main programme. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, skeet surfing is pretty bad. I don't mind the one in the Gay Schlufen, but yeah, then there's his actual concert, which goes on and on, is really laboured.
Yeah.
And then the one in Das Pizza Hutten, I think that's terrible.
It's that's the weirdest one, because by that point in the film, you think surely all this is behind you. You know, there's no excuse for another song, but it
would be good if it was like like a Weird Al Yankovic or something, a song that really is, you know, sparkly and fascinating. But it's that last one is Pick Up a Rug or something, isn't it? And
I think the suicidal one, the one that he performs at his concert, does seem to be trying to be funny with all the visual gags about suicide, but again, that comes in the second half of the song, and they're so laboured and Anyway, breezing on.
Breezing on. All right, so I'm just listing, like, I've got funny in the skeet surfing sequence, 2 shots that really made my kids laugh.
Breast shot, so it's got to be
the breast shot, which is a classic. My little boy was just like, boobies. And I think, but you can imagine, like, that's Abrahams and Zucker just going boobies while they're shooting, and then the old lady that's in the mix running down towards the beach with her shotgun. They were just like, look, it's an old lady. Like,
I never even saw that.
Yeah, you know, there's a really quite a nice shot of like 30 people running down the beach in a line, and the camera's kind of tracking back and revealing more and more people. And there's an old granny in there with a shotgun. And then we get, what do we get next? Talk about the cultural festival as a diversionary plan. This is all the plotting to, you know, have a nuclear mine to blow up the Allied fleet or something, and the resurgence of the Reich. We see Nick and his manager on a train the manager's reading the Daily Oppressor. I always like, and Nick's doing that painting out of the window, and it's just all blurry. Like those little gags. I think that they could have just ditched all the dialogue and gone for like a purely visual, silent movie treatment. That would have been really nice.
I just want to do a little shout out to the guy who plays his manager, Billy J. Mitchell.
Yeah. He's good.
He gets a lot of really, really, well, I don't say gets it, but he's got some really, really nice bits of business. There's a little bit where he kind of trails off at the end of a sentence and then just leaves it.
Yeah, his reaction shots are really good as well, aren't they?
He plays it just right. He's kind of straight but funny with it.
Yeah, there's the thing later on where Nick's in prison and he's saying to him, I've spoke to the cultural attaché, I've spoke to the diplomat, blah, blah, blah. He's like, can't bring my wife to orgasm.
But I think this is my first, this is the first one on my excellent list, is the whole thing with the station platform and the train.
We already had stuff off your shit list with skeet surfing.
In fact, I've only got the songs on the appalling list.
Okay.
The bad list consists of... There's not that many kind of bad jokes. I didn't list any of the good jokes, which are just good jokes.
Yeah, okay.
Like, just, ones that didn't make me absolutely crack up, but are still quite good. But I kind of gave up with the bad jokes. The ones that I didn't like much of the stuff with Omar Sharif. I didn't like I Know a Little German.
You didn't like a little German? It's over there.
The Nutcracker Suite, that whole stage thing with the appalling opticals.
Yeah.
A couple of shots where they zoom in like 50% on 35mm film, and it just looks terrible. And
I mean, that's so juvenile, that sequence, and so flat, and
yeah. But I did like all the chaos that ensues at the end of that scene. Did you see the old couple having sex in the audience?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I thought that's where Kruger had landed, and then I was like, oh, is that what that is? Yeah.
I only noticed it on this last viewing for making notes. I was like, is that really happening? And then I thought the pigeon statue joke was funny, but the poopy at the end was just that just had to happen, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was funny enough as just a joke with a giant pigeon statue with little people on it, but having it do poopy.
I was sat between two kids at that sequence, so that was like a moment when they were pointing at the screen going, look, as the people came flying down, and then when it did a massive poo at the end, they were in hysterics. So I think that's the target demographic for that specific gag.
But I kind of gave up being curmudgeonly after that. I haven't got any more on the list.
Oh, that's kind of you. So we're on your first of your good gags.
First of my excellent gags was the entire sequence on the train. Well, the end of the train sequence where the train appears to pull off, but it's actually the platform pulling off.
So good, isn't it?
And then you take that step into like Monty Python-ness with a businessman running after it to catch it.
Yeah.
And then another aside later on, which is completely irrelevant, but you just see another businessman running to catch a tree. This moving in the
jumps
same
on,
way.
doesn't he? Yeah, it's so good. I love that sequence.
Yeah. I mean, my next one is the map, the kind of like adventure movie map showing you route from England to East Germany. Is this set?
Yeah, set in East Germany. Is it East Berlin?
East Berlin. But then the map and the route that gets increasingly elaborate with more and more sound effects and
yeah, and then it just devolves into Pac-Man, doesn't it? Such a nice gag. And then we get the I don't know if I'm bullet pointing like things that make me laugh, like that East German women's Olympic team handing out keys to the city. I think that's maybe dated, but still an excellent gag. Oh my god. Yeah, so I think we're in danger of just doing a line by line, gag by gag reminiscence of Top Secret. So maybe if we structure it into the acts, first act, second, third, and try and be a bit disciplined with it and not just go off on some sprawling bad comedy recital.
I'll tell you what's funny about this film is that something I've noticed over the years is that a lot of movies are far, far more interesting in their first and second acts and succeed a lot better and I guess maybe try harder than in their third act.
Oh my god, I watched Stripes the other day and I was like, this was really good when I was a kid. You know, I remember there being loads of laughs, and it gets 2/3 of the way through and then it just dies. Like the third act is so boring. This kind of faux military incursion into foreign lands, and this weird RV that's armed to the teeth, and it becomes very much about like American superior firepower, and it just sort of defeats
I mean, I've not seen that, but that from what you said, it sounds like the problem that I have. I mean, it's not a big thing. It's just like a vague dropping off of flavour. I find it's more interesting the setup a lot of time, and then when the gears start grinding for the third act, it just kind of motors through and stops showing you interesting things.
Yeah,
because it's like, more in the process of just finishing off what it's set up.
Yeah, that's it. It's kind of obliged to try and make all of the setup pay off, and especially if you've got a Cold War or a military setup, then it's going to have to be something quite grand, isn't it? To just justify the initial engagement.
But I find almost subconsciously, even with films that I really like, and if I was to put my mind to it, there'd probably be quite a few favourites of mine that have still dropped off in that way. And I think it's ones that you remember really, really, that you're really impressed by. You'll find they don't do this, that they don't kind of fall off in that way. But this movie is the exact opposite. I find it takes a while to warm up, and I find if you break it into 3 acts, the first act is by far, and this is drawing boxes around all the gags in my list, by far more entertaining and more solid in the third act, which is weird because it is still doing that thing, isn't it? It's still just, everything starts to escalate and it has to finish up the story, but
they do escalate the gags as well, so you do get like some quite elaborate set pieces and elaborate kind of visual treats and tricks in the third act, and it does get a bit even more puerile as well in places. So yeah, I think I agree with you. So the first act deals with Nick, an American musician who's been invited to the diversionary tactic of a cultural exhibition, and he's replacing, is it Leonard Bernstein, who couldn't make it. And so I mean, that's the gag, right? It's just a fish out of water and a young naive American rock star coming behind the Iron Curtain and getting embroiled in some nonsensical.
Can we talk about Val Kilmer at this stage, maybe?
Yeah. Let's talk about. He looks beautiful, doesn't he? He's got a beautiful smile, sparkly eyes.
Yeah, he's a
live,
weird character-free void in this movie, though.
Yeah.
And it did raise larger questions for me, larger Val Kilmer-based questions.
Oh yeah, okay.
Which are, Val Kilmer is not somebody I ever look out for, and if he appears in something that looks otherwise good, I'll say, well, okay, he must have some. When he was cast in Heat,
oh yeah,
which is way back now, 25 years ago, but I remember thinking at the time, oh, okay, he must have some hidden depths that I wasn't otherwise aware of.
Yeah, sure.
But again, looking back at him in that, I think there's a lot of other actors could have done the same with the role.
Yeah, it'd be nice someone brought a bit more soul to it.
Yeah. But in this, which is his complete debut, it's odd. In this first act, you should be kind of building. I mean, I guess you could argue against everything I'm about to say and just say, in the name of comedy, you don't need to do that. But you should possibly be building a character that you care about and has some interest in something or some thoughts, but he's just a complete void. It's just this kind of display of non-acting and non-charisma.
Do you think that's what it is? Do you think it's methods? Like he's deliberately going out of his way to play like an insular rock star that's been kind of brought up in the music business and just doesn't have any connection to the outside world, or do you think it's just a...
No, I just think it's an unwritten character with an actor who hasn't really got anything to bring to it. I mean, he's not bad in any way. It's just weird watching it, and you get to the end of the movie, you think, I know nothing. This character has actually done nothing in the entire movie. Like he has no agency at all. He just kind of drifts from set piece to set piece, and
he's really flat, isn't he?
Occasionally participates, but doesn't actually change the course of events in any way. It's very strange.
Yeah.
How are you a Val Kilmer?
Oh well, I've seen him in things. He's never on my list of actors to follow their career. I hope he's okay. I know he's been ill recently, so I hope he's okay. I like him in Top Gun, Tombstone.
I had to go back because he seems always to have been there. and then when you realise that this is his first movie, you think, okay, well, this is the starting point. At what point between this and, let's say, well, that was the thing, I couldn't put my finger on at what point he became a star.
Well, maybe The Doors, maybe that was a big one.
Yeah, but even at that point, he was kind of around, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I had to go back and kind of go through his filmography and think, okay, I mean, I've never seen Top Gun more than 25 minutes in. I always just get bored and switch off. And this is going back to when I was a teenager, and that's not a point of pride, it's just an observation.
Yeah, sure.
I just can't get into it. So I didn't know that he was in that. So you see that on the list, you think, yeah, that must have been memorable for a few people back then. They must have known him from that.
Yeah, he was really good in that. And he plays like, what do you call it? It's the antithesis of the Cruise character, and then they eventually become buddies by the end. It's good. It's nice. It's a nice little arc. And then really, I don't know, man. I saw him in. Obviously, he has that nice cameo in True Romance. And then he was in that David Mamet film.
Oh, Spartan.
Spartan, yeah. Which felt like it was going to be incredible and was really boring. And I think that's the last time I tracked down a Val Kilmer film.
That was the first half was really good, wasn't it? And then just kind of goes nowhere. Yeah, so I guess you have Val Kilmer, as you say, kind of sparkling and twinkling. I can't get beyond his kind of amiable smile and his hair.
Yeah.
Can't get any deeper into it than that, but maybe that's the intention. And the first act is basically, him kind of stumbling into various complicated political situations, and by the end of the first act he's kind of ended up imprisoned by the East Germans. Mm-hmm. Is there anything within that first act that you want to highlight specifically?
I mean, the sort of main plot points are when Hillary comes into the story, the damsel in distress that he sort of rescues at the ball, and then for that gag when they're trying to escape, and they go into the prop room and look out of the window, and they look down at the street, and there's all those cars with the little mice
model
running
shot,
in between. Yeah. But do you know where that model shot is from? They were rooting around in the cupboards at Pinewood and Shepperton when they found this old set that had been built already, so they just picked it up, took it onto the studio and shot it.
I'm guessing, is it Superman the movie?
It's Superman. Yeah, so that shot is from Superman. No, that set, that little model miniature is from Superman.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, I think that's a nice little bit of trivia. You know, this idea. You know, if you've been to Pinewood or Shepperton, those kind of storerooms that are just full of like junk and bits and bobs, and hidden in there was like bits from Superman.
They make really good use of the accidentals from that. Having like one of the mice comes legging it onto the set and smashes into the others, and they use the car crash sets. And by the end of Act 1, Nick's been imprisoned, which leads to quite possibly my favourite. Easily one of my top favourite gags in this and in anything ever. It's just the completely unexpected dream sequence when he's being tortured and whipped and passes out, and then it kind of dissolves into this dream sequence where it's just your classic anxiety dream where he's back at school, finds that the terms just ended and he never revised and never studied for his exams and missed everything. And then comes to during the torture and is perfectly happy because being tortured is easier than the anxiety dream. But it sounds tortuous in my description, but it's just so unexpected and so brilliant.
Yeah, it's funny. We're moving into the second act, which the second act is just about Nick and Hillary getting to know each other and to sort of expand a little bit on the plot such as it is.
Yeah, and connecting with the Resistance, who are all the supporting players for the big fight at the end.
We do meet Hillary's dad, don't we?
Paul Flamond.
Yeah, played by
Michael Gough.
Michael Gough played Alfred to Kilmer's Batman.
Not having seen that Batman movie, I didn't know that. But I've got a list of all the British actors who were on hand when this production arrived in the UK.
Yeah.
Got Ian McNeice, who's the joke peddler, who was just making his mark at that point.
Souvenirs, novelties, party tricks.
Yeah, not my favourite bit.
But that gag was at the end of that sequence was one of like my gang. It was one of our gags. You dropped your phony dog poo. What phony dog poo? Like that silly gag that ran for about 3 years with me and my mates
in the Navy.
No, it's in school.
So you got Michael Gough, but a lot of these guys can just literally turn up and phone it in and still be perfect. Actually, like note perfect for everything.
I love John Sharp, the guy that plays the maitre d'. He's like, doesn't even know what accent he's supposed to be doing. He's just like, yeah, I don't know.
There's so many faces in this now. You're watching now, you think, oh, it's him. Oh, it's him.
Yeah,
it's him. Jeremy Kemp and Jim Carter as Deja Vu.
Any gags you want to dwell on from Act 2?
The ongoing joke about bikes being horses. Again, when they steal a couple of bicycles on their when they're running away. And chase off the remaining bicycles who kind of flee like startled horses.
But, I mean, going back to the point I was trying to make earlier about those tiny little background details that really keep me giggling all the way through this. In that sequence, there's a sign up on the wall that just says, emergency exit. Like, those things, I think, to have gone to that kind of detail, that's where my joy is with this film, is looking around the background.
I guess we're coming up to the scene which absolutely everyone remembers and kind of defines the movie, really, and it's the best visual gag, isn't it? It's the Swedish bookstore.
Yeah, so good.
It's
oh my god,
flawless. It gives you a headache as you're watching it, trying to work out how it was choreographed and how many takes they must have had to do.
Yeah, that's it. I think when I was a kid, we just sort of realised that it was backwards. You know, and when they go up the fireman's pole, as you get older and you're looking at it and you see like the blocking and the sort of reverse performances, and you realise all the dialogue had to be kind of learned backwards, and like nothing about the action of making that sequence would have made any sense. So how beautiful it is, because it's just, like you say, flawless. You already beat me to the best word.
But there's little incidental pleasures in it as well. Like you can see either Val Kilmer's clearly enjoying it,
he looks really happy,
or playing Nick as enjoying it, or he's rubbing his hands and grinning as he's throwing the books up on the shelf, and preparing himself for the next one. Yeah,
and I think Peter Cushing is pretty funny in this. That where he takes them away the magnifying glass and he has that giant eye behind it. To have sat, God knows how long, that poor old boy sat in makeup just for that one gag. But it's worth it. The Swedish bookstore sequence, if you go on YouTube, somebody's put it in reverse order so you can watch it.
Oh, okay.
Back to front to back. It's a nice kind of aside.
I've got another one circled immediately afterwards, which brings me to tears every time I see it. The singing horse, as just
yeah, because you start with a wide shot and you see the horse and the farmer and the big bale of hay, and you just assume it's him singing along, and then you cut into the close up of the horse, and not only does the horse look like it's singing, it looks like it's enjoying singing. It's really good.
And I don't even begrudge the terrible, terrible gag at the end. Is your horse ill? No, he's just a little horse. You arrive at the potato farm and meet the French resistance, who all have ridiculous but quite funny names.
Yeah, it's a really good roll call, isn't it? Which again reminded me of Inglourious Bastards.
Du quoi? Introduce the American to the men.
Very well. This is Chevalier, Montage, Détente, Avant-Garde, and Déjà Vu.
Have we not met before, monsieur?
I don't think so.
Yeah, the first lot is just kind of like random French words, and then the second lot is all foods and foodstuffs, isn't it? So,
Au revoir, croissant, soufflé, escargot, chocolat mousse.
Yeah, I think I love, obviously I love Déjà Vu, but the one that always makes me laugh is Montage. I think that's such a great name for a character, Montage.
And we meet Nigel, don't we?
Nigel, who we'd been previously introduced in a flashback for Hillary. It was a lost love. They'd been on a desert island. Is it the Blue Lagoon? It's supposed to be a parody of that, I think.
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
But with child actors, so we now meet Christopher Viers as Nigel, who gives such an amazingly good performance. He's just so petulant and English. Even his eyes are petulant and childish and spiteful.
Yeah, but there's some great kind of like camp sexy moments too when he's in the cow, which are just really believable. He's one of those kind of like staple British actors, been around for years, been in everything, and just has had like a solid long career.
I think everyone British in this is the same. Everyone's just kind of like powered through for decades.
Yeah, holding on, fingers on the cliff.
I wouldn't say that. They've probably all got very comfortable houses in Chiswick and a second home in the country.
That's true. Those were the days. So one thing I really liked about the reveal on Nigel being the Torch, the leader of the Resistance, is when he comes out the door for the big reveal. He's still in his desert island costume from the flashback, which I don't know. That gag always lands. Just think that's a brilliant reveal, and his hair is exactly the same, and it's just so funny because she looks obviously completely different.
He reminds me of. Obviously, he's kind of like a spoilt English boy. He reminds me of that kid, and I can't honestly be bothered Googling his name. Do you remember the little kid who was on TV in the late 80s who fancied himself as a genius?
Yeah, that's it. He was like an expert in antiques, wasn't he?
Yes.
And he was on Blue Peter and all of those things.
Yeah, and on This Morning and stuff like that.
I think Keith Allen made a documentary about him about 10 years ago that's still out there.
Yeah, I keep trying to find that on YouTube because I watched it at the time, and it was bad, but it was good car crash documentary filmmaking.
Yeah, but it was kind of sympathetic to him as well, because he was just like, I was blagging it. Basically, if I didn't know an antique, I would always say 13th century or something, because most of the antiques that people wheel out are from the 13th century.
So the third act is basically an incredible, just non-stop barrage of good big gags and good small gags and asides and observations. And I think for somebody who can often get exhausted by comedy, I find it difficult to sit through an hour of stand-up, because after half an hour I'm just kind of detaching a bit.
Yeah, sure.
It's remarkable that, an hour into this movie, I'm so warmed up, and it just keeps giving and giving and giving, that I feel there's some magic at work in this third act, which heightens every single gag, even things that had they cropped up in the first act would have been less impressive. There's just so much momentum going on here that.
Yeah, I mean, but again, go back to some of the optical gags, trying to avoid just listing them off, because that also sterilizes the film somewhat. But Nigel looking through the binoculars, and we see his point of view of the cows in the field, and it's one of those traditional binocular cutout optical
intersecting circles.
And then the cows leap over it as if it's a gate, and they walk past it, and it's just like, that's incredible. Because the filmmaker in us all, it's like, so what have they done? They've built a giant POV, set it up in a field, got the cows to step through it just for that one throwaway second. I'm just like, I applaud them for that.
Yeah. Nigel's elaborate model plan for the raid.
Again, Again, I was watching it with my kids, and as that pulled out and just got bigger and bigger, he was like, wow, they brought in a pretty impressive model with them to go through the plan. I was like, yeah, that's the gag. It's really good. And even, when they sound the alarm and you see all the vehicles thundering around the curve, and then the camera just pulls out, zooms out a little bit, and you see that they're just driving in a circle. It's like, that's so funny.
What astonishes me as well is they dress up in a cow outfit to blend in with a herd of cows that can then get them through the gate into the castle grounds. But I still don't understand it, watching it for a second time to make notes, how even innocuous shots that don't actually have a visual gag can be so funny. I don't know if it's just the audacity of having this stupid looking fake cow costume. And then cut to a cow in wellies.
A real cow.
A real cow with wellies.
Painted on it, wearing wellies, it's so
becoming
funny.
The character. But then point of view shots for the cow with voiceover. The juxtaposition of those two is somehow very, very funny.
And they keep cutting inside to the two guys inside the cow as well. It's like, that's bonkers. As a sequence, that is bonkers.
Yeah, but it works perfectly in every single shot in it. Even things that are seemingly innocuous and shouldn't be funny are funny.
Like the safe cracking thing where you just see the cow's head with the stethoscope in, but he's smoking because he's concentrating on the...
But the movement of the cow's head is just spot on for it as well.
Yeah, it's really good. And he puffs out the smoke. It's just like, what?
There's the weird and fairly obvious sexual gags where a calf turns up and starts suckling on Nigel.
Yeah.
Again,
he's brilliant.
Nails the camp performance, doesn't he?
Yeah,
the kind of enjoyment.
Why was in such a bloody hurry? It's so good.
And then at the end of it, there's the inevitable bull turns up, and that weird kind of 80s trope of if you dress up in an animal costume, you'll get fucked by an animal, which is in trading places as well. but it's all funny.
Yeah, I mean, they're so pleasurable, aren't they, some of these gags? You know, I think probably the slightly flattest sequence is the motorcycle chase with where Nick catches up with Nigel.
But I do like the Roadrunner.
Yeah, and well, they do it as a kind of silent movie thing, don't they? The sort of fight sequence and the reactions.
Oh yeah, the Raiders of the Lost Ark thing. Yeah,
yeah. The motorcycle stunts are done by Eddie Kidd. Remember Eddie Kidd?
yeah, I do.
Yeah, so that's him.
Eddie Kidd,
High-flying Eddie Kidd.
the high point of a lot of like local country fairs around the UK.
Yeah. But he did a motorcycle battle, shall we call it, with Evel Knievel's son, and he won that. He was, he's a legend of motorcycle stunts in the 70s and 80s.
Okay. And then we kind of go through, I mean, these things happen one after another, and amazing jokes and everything. The underwater fight seems like a diversion, and seems just like a slight digression, and you feel that when you come out of it, it's brilliant, by the way. But you feel that when you come out of it, the film's actually the conflict's going to be resolved another way. But then you realise that is actually the conflict resolution.
Yeah, that's
that is the
Nigel,
fight between the good guy and the bad guy. Is that
once
joke.
he gets punched out of the window, he's gone, isn't he? We never see him again.
And then within seconds, the film's over. You get the amazing goodbye scene, which is the one joke that I actually remembered most strongly from my first viewing. Is that I'll miss you most of all, Scarecrow.
yeah.
For some reason, that's the one that's stuck with me since the mid-'80s.
Yeah, it's really good.
And then the film's over.
Yeah, that's it.
Which kind of brings me to something that Zucker and Abrams said in the interview that I saw recently, where they were talking about their career, and they kind of touched on this, and they said one of the problems this film had, the reason that it didn't succeed, is that it didn't really have a story and characters as such. I mean, no matter how tenuous, you have to set up characters in a story and care about them and have it resolve, whereas this was just basically gag after gag after gag.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have that thread.
I think maybe there's something in the casting of Val Kilmer as Nick, because it feels like Nick should be one of those kind of bimbo characters that he's just is totally out of his depth, and everything happens without any kind of input from him. He's just dragged along, basically, and he should just be completely oblivious to these world-changing events that he's somehow been drawn into. But there's something about his, the slight arrogance and confidence to his performance that throws that off. You know, he almost needed to be less charming and more sort of glass-eyed. He's almost there, but there's something in Kilmer's performance that is kind of like cocky and cocksure, and he almost needs to be like much more of a simpleton. And
the film just ends, doesn't it? It's just kind of, and that was it? You're expecting...
Yeah, they get on the plane and they go,
Yeah.
Did you watch the credits all the way through?
No. Are they good?
There's a couple of those typical quirky credits. There's one where it says 4 E's, and then on the right it says a jolly good fellow. And there's a few of those kind of gags. But then there's a reprise. There's a musical number in the last minute where Val Kilmer and the quartet come up and they sing us out of the theatre. So there's another musical number that you missed. You dodged a bullet, as they say.
Or is the age-old question, would you recommend it? And who to?
Like I say, I sent a copy to a friend who just was like, thanks for that, it was shit. But then I sat with my kids and watched them like laughing at especially the kind of optical stuff. I think you have to see it young enough that your cynicism doesn't tarnish your experience of the gags.
I would recommend it without hesitation. It's a difficult film to warm to because it doesn't know what it is for its first act. It's all over the place. But I don't know. I think there's enough funny stuff in there that anybody who's got a sense of humour should get something out. I mean, there is literally something for everyone every 5 minutes.